All right. So, hi everyone. It's an honor to be here. My name's Griffin. I'm a fourth-year BA and M.Sc candidate at USC, and also a member of the USC Regulatory Science Research Team, where I'm supported by my faculty mentor, Dr. Terry Church. And my research is on disposable electronic nicotine delivery systems and underage nicotine addiction, a survey of college students. So a little bit of background to start us off. Disposable electronic nicotine delivery systems, or ENDS, refers to e-cigarettes that contain a battery, heating element, and nicotine e-liquid that are disposed of after a single use. And most disposable ENDS being sold in the US have not received pre-market approval from the FDA. Yet the 2022 National Youth Tobacco Survey indicates that disposable ENDS are the most common ENDS device used by middle and high schoolers. Furthermore, flavors are prohibited in pod-based ENDS, but are still commonly sold in disposable ENDS, and flavors have been shown to be a risk factor for underage ENDS use. And then lastly, the legal age to consume ENDS in the US is 21, so it's hypothesized that underage adult ENDS users between 18 and 20 years old may exhibit similar ENDS perceptions and patterns of use to youth users. So the objective of my study was to identify factors enabling the growing underage consumption of disposable ENDS by understanding young adults' perceptions and patterns of disposable ENDS use through a survey of college students. In my methods, first I examined the CDC's National Youth Tobacco Survey for patterns of ENDS use among adolescents and identified gaps in that current survey data, revealing lacking information about disposable ENDS trends among underage persons. And based on those gaps, I developed an anonymous survey for underage ENDS users, which received approval from USC IRB. And then it was distributed to university students via social media, university email distribution lists, and flyers with QR codes posted around campus. And then I analyzed these responses to identify trends and correlations in disposable ENDS use among college students. So some results. For a total of 231 completed survey responses were collected from March 6, 2022 to February 17, 2023. 222 of these responses were included in data analysis after excluding non-college students, and 183 of these respondents were in the target age group of 18 to 20 years old. So figure 1 here shows that 56% of underage respondents indicated that they had used ENDS at least once in their lifetime. And of those ENDS using underage respondents, 71% indicated disposable ENDS as their most common device type over pod-based ENDS such as Juul or tank or mod-based ENDS. And table 1 here shows a concerning result of the frequency of ENDS used by these underage disposable ENDS users, with the majority of these respondents using the devices more than 10 times per day. Figure 3 here shows the flavor of disposable ENDS most commonly used by these respondents. Most common response chosen was some other flavor other than mint, menthol, or tobacco, and closely followed by mint as another common flavor, with very few respondents indicating that they use disposable ENDS in menthol or tobacco flavor, which is significant because menthol and tobacco are the only flavors still approved for sale in pod-based ENDS such as Juul. And figure 4 here shows the most attractive identified aspect of disposable ENDS that leads these underage users to choose them over other ENDS types. The most common choice by far was convenience or ease of use, but followed by their friends using them, as well as flavor. And some results in terms of brand popularity. This survey revealed that the most common disposable ENDS brand among youth ENDS users was Flume, and followed by Puff Bar, with a few other responses for other brands as well. And then figure 6 shows where underage disposable ends users are typically acquiring the devices. The majority, 42%, acquire their devices from convenience stores, followed by 34% at smoke shops. And this shows that the majority of these underage disposable ends users are acquiring the devices from in-person storefronts rather than online. So conclusions I was able to draw from this data, first of all, is that this survey supported the results from the 2022 National Youth Tobacco Survey that disposable ends are the new device furthering underage nicotine addiction. And this is really concerning because so few disposable ends that are currently on the market, and there are a lot of them, have been cleared by the FDA. Furthermore, frequent disposable ends consumption by underage users may be a greater risk factor for nicotine addiction. So these disposable ends are already being sold in very high concentrations of nicotine, which when you mix that with high frequency of use, makes it much more likely to result in nicotine addiction. Additionally, flavored disposable ends are very commonly used by these underage users, which is important to say because flavors are no longer approved for sale for pod-based ends they used to be very popular among underage users. And additionally, the most attractive aspect of disposable ends identified by these underage respondents was convenience. And this is likely because disposable ends are just a single device, single purchase needed to begin consuming nicotine, which makes disposable ends use very easy and simple. Some additional conclusions. This survey results also indicated that social influences are a factor in underage disposable ends use, with many of the respondents indicating that friends using disposable ends was a reason that they use them as well. Also, there are many popular brands of disposable ends, and Google search can confirm this if you want to look into it more. But Puff Bar, who's been the majority of the focus of the FDA, was listed or was indicated as the second most popular brand among our respondents. And they were issued a warning letter by the FDA for lack of marketing authorization and actually recently pulled from the market. But while almost all of the FDA focus on the disposable ends industry has been centered around the brand Puff Bar, other brands such as Flume have gained popularity among underage users and deserves some recognition from the FDA and FDA action. And then lastly, most underage persons are acquiring disposable ends through in-person stores. And this is either because they're using fake IDs or retailers are failing to properly ID. This survey was unable to determine which of those it is. But what we could determine is that current regulatory and legal efforts are failing to prevent underage acquisition of ends and disposable ends. So here's my references. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Great talk. Yeah, impressive you were able to collect these data under these circumstances with the pandemic. It made it tough, but yeah, really interesting. Many interesting parts of your talk, especially the zero tobacco flavored users. I'm just wondering, so when you think about the crossover of cannabis, right, especially here in California, and e-cigarettes, do you have any kind of thought about that as like a next direction for your research? And yeah, thank you for your talk.
Yeah, so I have done some, and one of my colleagues with the regulatory science research team actually had been doing a lot of research into cannabis and some specific emphasis on ends with cannabis. I haven't thought about necessarily going in that direction and don't have a lot of personal experience in that area, but it is something I'd definitely like to look into, and something that's a bit more iffy regulatory-wise because, you know, it's one of those things that's legal in California, but FDA doesn't have many regulations. They're starting to release some guidances on regulating cannabis, but yeah, it is something I would like to look into, definitely.
Any other questions?
Thank you,
All right.
Griffin.
Thank you.